So, Ali Bracken, welcome to the Crime World studio. And we're coming on today, unusually on a Sunday. And it's largely because both you and I have reported a story today about Gerry the Monk Hutch and how he's considering running for the Dáil. And we thought, what a better time to discuss this than while that story's out there, because no doubt it's going to, have a lot of reaction. It's going to be the subject of the Sunday shows and all the rest of it. So let's talk about this. I mean, anybody I've mentioned this to have gone, they've laughed, right? Yeah. They've smiled, they've laughed, they've gone, wow, he must be a mad fucker. And then they've gone, I'd vote for him.
Well, this is it. And I mean, I don't know about you, Nicola, but when I heard from my sources, it took me hugely by surprise. It's not something I saw coming with him whatsoever. So obviously we both went about our business and confirmed it and only put it out when we were 100% satisfied that this is something he's very serious about in his consideration at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he only has a limited amount of time to make that decision as well now, because I think we both know the election's probably looking likely before Christmas at this stage.
Now, I suppose just to get down to a little bit of brass tactics, first of all, to put yourself forward for election, you have two options, don't you? You can get 30 signatures from people within your constituency, or you can pay €500, right?
Okay.
So do we all reckon that if you can't get the 30 signatures, you might as well throw your hat at it in the first place?
Well, I don't know. Just to look in the constituency, because obviously Gerry Hutch will be running in Dublin Central. Sean O'Leary, who got 12 votes.
Who's Sean O'Leary?
I don't know. Some independent. So
when was that?
That was in the last general election in 2020. So
right.
So, but I mean, Gerry Hutch is totally different than other figures linked to criminality in this country. And I think, remember when he was found not guilty and he walked out at that moment and the public are honking their horns, waving at him. I mean, it's just a unique situation.
That was last April, of course, after the Special Criminal Court trial, the Regency trial. Paul Murphy and Jason Bonney were found guilty of their roles in it, which were far lesser. But Gerry the Monk Hutch was brought back from Spain and put on trial for murder. And it was a sensational trial and it was a sensational day.
For sure.
When he was found not guilty.
Yeah, but I think there was even, from the moment he was being extradited in 2021, there was already a Free the Monk hashtag on Twitter. And it was being shared hundreds of thousands of times.
And most recently, when Kelly Harrington obviously came back and celebrated winning her gold medal in the North Inner City, and Gerry Hutch appeared. Gerry Hutch obviously would have known her through the boxing scene, which he's been heavily involved in. Again, he's treated like, almost like a member of, well, I was going to say One Direction, but that's probably bad timing, but like kind of like a celebrity figure. So it's like he does, there's no doubt that people in the North Inner City have a particular perspective on Gerry Hutch and probably have had for quite a while.
There's huge affection for him. It's kind of this lovable rogue criminal figure. Whether that translates into votes, if he does run, is another matter entirely.
100%. And of course, that's a perspective within the community. And it's a reputation that he's, I think, manufactured very carefully as well. I mean, there's another reputation, and that reputation was referenced in the Special Criminal Court in the judgment made, where he was described as the patriarch of a criminal organisation. And obviously, if you were to speak to Gardaí or other people involved in investigating crime over many decades, they don't think he's a lovable rogue.
No. Let's have a look first at the life and crimes and the times of Gerry Hutch, I suppose. So we'll bring him back. He's born in the 1960s in Dublin, in the North Inner City, into an impoverished family. I think the father had work on the docks, and of course, it was that time when that all ran dry, and he was brought up. It was 8 of them, was it?
8 children.
8 children,
yeah.
And he was in and out of a couple of those institutions for sort of stealing and robbing.
Yeah. I think it was 11 times he was in
really
one of those industrial skills in some form, yeah.
And they were vicious places. And I think that we could all say that a lot of people that did get involved in crime, children in particular in those days, were doing it probably because they were hungry.
Yeah. Well, and also it was that first wave of sort of crime really to hit Ireland. I mean, obviously crime had always existed, but it was the first. I mean, he was part of the Bugsy Malones famously, and they became a media sensation really because they were regarded as the absolutely out of control teens, and it was this new wave of something we've never seen before. I mean, I think there was robbery of shops really, wasn't it? Jump overs.
Yeah, a lot of it was low level. I think he gave his first interview when he was 16 to RTE Radio, where he's just said, I can't stop robbing. Yeah. If I go past a car and I see a handbag, I'm going to break that window and I'm going to get that handbag. So he was kind of openly as a young man saying that he was involved in kind of low level criminality, but it was in order to survive. That was definitely what was being propagated as the reason, and that's probably how his criminal career began.
And in a way, his celebrity criminal career, because they were super famous.
The Bugsy Malones were super famous. I mean, it was ridiculous the amount of press, media they were getting, given the fact that they were really just a load of young kids who were stopping cars at the lights and stealing handbags, running into the flats.
I mean, if you look back at it now, it's almost, it looks kind of now, it's amazing that it could cause such a sensation, but it was regarded as being this break from the norm.
But it was a very imperfect, unfair, marginalised place. The society was, we handled a lot of things wrong then. I mean, sending kids to these cruel institutions where they were abused and often raped because they had stolen
and truancy.
To feed their siblings.
Remember, a lot of people ended up in those institutions for simply not going to school. I mean, incredible to think of it, but teenagers will be locked up for that,
It is incredible. And we did create something by that. By that reaction to it. And I think we hear, it over the years, some of his contemporaries like Martin the General Cahill called it his kind of schooling was through the institutions initially and then prisons, So as a society, we did things very wrong then, and we did create these kind of individuals who went out in the world to take what they weren't given.
Yeah.
That's it.
They were alienated from society in a way that maybe previous generations hadn't been, and therefore they felt they owed nothing to society. And
it's that kind of thing, nothing to lose. And especially as a teenager from an area of deprivation, there would have been a huge amount of that, in all parts of, not just in Dublin City, in parts of Limerick and parts of Cork in those early days. But the Bugsy Malone gang seemed to get a spotlight put on them. And then obviously Gerry Hutch kind of graduated from that as he grew up into kind of hitting, I think by 20, he had about 30 criminal convictions. But again, for kind of low level, for burglary, robbery, joyriding, that kind of thing. And I think his last criminal conviction, I think, is over 40 years ago in the kind of early 80s, where I think he got 2 or 3 years for malicious damage. And that's the last criminal conviction he has.
Yeah.
And he since has given an interview, I think, saying that that's the last, as far as he's concerned, that's the last crime he committed.
As far as he's concerned.
Yes. As far as he's concerned, yeah.
but as far as...
He, of course, was suspected of those two biggest robberies of the 90s, were they? The Brinks Allied and the Marino Mart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Marino Mart was first and the Brinks Allied.
He's looking at me like I've got what
No, I'm just wondering, was one of them in the 80s, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think one of them was the late 80s and the second
Pedantic.
one was 95.
Well, look.
He's running away with himself there now.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, look, we say in and around then, okay?
Yeah.
So those two robberies, he was suspected of being the mastermind of them. They were incredibly... complex, the way they were arranged.
They were, armed robberies.
Yeah.
It was men with guns terrifying people. And
a lot of money stolen.
Yeah. I mean, I think the second one was, at that point, biggest armed robbery in the history of the state. Over 3 million euro or pounds in those days.
Yeah.
They were serious robberies.
Yeah. And he's obviously graduated then to becoming like a prominent criminal figure. I mean, again, like he has been linked to each wave of organised crime, because obviously armed robberies then in the 80s and in the early 90s became the primary route in which organised criminals made money. I mean, Gerry Hutch would have been suspected of robberies in the 80s, some of them involving people that had links to dissident groups, not dissident groups, to Republican groups at that stage. And it's believed he was mentored through that process by people, along with people like Eamon Kelly as well, who would ultimately be murdered. So by the 90s, he started to appear in the Sunday Indo. I mean, under the name, the moniker, The Monk.
Yeah.
Veronica Guerin, I think, wrote the first major articles describing him as, I think, the up-and-coming number one youngish criminal anyway at the time. And wasn't it said to have angered Martin Cahill that the monk was regarded as being the mastermind in the criminal underworld?
I think she had a relationship with him in terms of they were as in contact and source, etc. And they met and they would have spoken. She seemed to have a lot more respect and affection for him than she did obviously maybe some other criminals that she interviewed. Yeah,
because she got shot in the leg, and wasn't it said that John Traynor told her that the monk had her shot, and she called up to him and confronted him, and Gerry Hutch sat down with her, and she wrote an article about the whole thing, and that's where he got the nickname the monk, as a clean living, non-drinking, non-smoking, which I don't.
That was the biggest fraud ever, if you don't mind me saying. But anyway,
I don't believe. From what I know, I don't believe he smokes. But I've heard he's partial to a few drinks.
I think he is. I think we got a photograph of him in 2013.
Well, didn't he tell during the Regency? Wasn't he talking to Jonathan Dowdall about his days in the rave scene?
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah, Polonese and everything. But so in '96, when Veronica Guerin was murdered, I mean, the monk stood outside this building here where there was a condolence book for her, and he queued and he signed that condolence book. In the aftermath of her death, the establishment of the Criminal Assets Bureau, he's one of the first guys they target, which I think he always felt a bit raw by. I know others as well that felt, this cab was, the reason for its existence was John Gilligan, and why didn't they just go for the kind of, at that stage, the monk very much had this sort of narrative out there that he wasn't a drug dealer, he had nothing to do with drugs, he was very much anti-drugs. He had, paraded around the streets with the parents against drugs, and had very much put out that he might have been, he was an ordinary, decent criminal, I suppose. And I think he felt a bit sour that the Criminal Assets Bureau went for him. Yeah. But go for him they did in a tax case.
Oh yeah.
They've two ways of going for people, they still do. But in the early days, they used to go for these tax cases. I just don't totally understand it.
What they would say was that, you have £3 million worth of assets. So you must have made £3 million, so you have to pay the tax on that.
Yeah.
They don't have to prove where you got the money. Just if you have that money, you have to pay tax. Yeah. So there's no proof of this is the proceeds of crime.
Proceeds of crime is a completely different thing. They identify the assets, and that you then have to come in and defend yourself and show and prove how you legitimately purchased them. But these tax cases are a little bit more complex. And the monk actually settled the case and handed over.
It was over 3 million. I think it was close to 3.5.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was they said they were after him in relation to those two armed robberies that we just discussed. It was specifically in relation to them.
To those, okay.
And others, but they were the two big ones.
So that was a big thing, that cab case, and it allowed the media, I think, talk about him a little bit more. There was, the fact that it was said that he was the chief suspect in those robberies. It allowed people to talk a bit looser about him as being this sort of criminal figure. But he moved on from that into quite an intriguing period of his life when he went for a taxi license, and he eventually got it, and he set up a company called Cab. Carry Anybody. Limousine and Hummer service. Yeah. And he spent a couple of years driving around Dublin, collecting celebrities, doing selfies with young people who hired his services. And in the Cap and all the rest of it.
Mike Tyson, he was pictured with famously. And also with a young reporter, Niall Donald, in the back of his Hummer. Yeah, I did, for the Sunday.
Did you?
Yeah.
And what did you feel like a gobshite? Did you say to him?
I'll have to find the picture, because I actually forgot about it.
Find that for us, will you?
And what
was he like? Did you tell him you're a reporter, or were you deep undercover in his car?
I can't remember, but there was some, I think there was, I'll have to dig it out. But I remember doing it in the background with a few people,
Yeah.
So deep undercover, dangerous work.
Dangerous. Yeah. Anyway, and around that time, his celebrity, he kind of he goes from this sort of criminal figure then to this sort of vaguely comical kind of figure, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think he always had a reputation within this community here in the North Inner City. Everybody knew him and everybody liked him. Well, in the main, obviously not everybody. But I think that the taxi limo thing was almost an extension of that. It was about him and his personality, but bringing it to a more national, wider scale. And it seemed to land quite well. It was him with the hat and and at the shoulder of Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
whoever it was.
He's
sort of a cheeky, chappy type of
yeah, it
aura
sort of
around him.
showed maybe a fun side of him.
And taking the piss out of cab. Like he did it immediately after the cab settlement. It was in a, I don't know if it would have been a particularly financially rewarding occupation, but I think it was just.
And he filed his tax returns for the company and everything, in the aftermath of it. But he was also voted, and it was a mark of his kind of growing celebrity, I suppose. He was voted one of the 100 sexiest men is that right, in Social and Personal or something like that?
Well, I can't remember the magazine yet, but I think he was 70 something out of 100, which is
a bad guy.
It's not that bad, things considered.
To be on the list.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't see any of us on it.
No.
So by about 2012, it was like as if he'd enough of his fun, and he sort of moves more full-time out to Lanzarote, where the narrative again is that he's retired.
Yeah. And
has he? That was questionable, but that was the narrative, that he'd retired. At that point, his nephew, the next generation of Hutches, had sort of come up, and Gerry Hutch had at that point been named as a very significant player in the Kinahan organised crime group.
Yes, and he had other family members that were linked to the Kinahans as well. The Kinahans had become, obviously, at that point, an absolute number one organisation in criminal organisation operating in the state beyond all measure. And, the Hutch organised crime group were really a sub-cell of that organisation at that point. It's kind of almost hard to remember, but Gerry Hutch was so very central, and people that Gerry Hutch had grown up with, that were his childhood friends, were also really key figures like Gary Finnegan and many others. And Hutch...
And remember at that point, sorry to interrupt you, but the Hutch organised crime gang didn't exist as such.
No.
It certainly hadn't officially been described as such.
No.
And we knew the Kinahans were, at that point, 2012, a mafia, because that's what the Spanish had described them as in 2010 when they initially tried to take them down. And when Gerry Hutch's role in the grouping became evident, he was seen as a senior lieutenant of Daniel Kinahan then. But the actual Hutch organised crime group, we don't know that exists as a formation then.
No, but if you do remember what's described in the Special Criminal Court, they don't describe the Hutch organised crime group in the same terms as the Kinahan organisation, which is a hierarchical organisation that operates in a cell structure. What they're saying about the Hutch organised crime group is that it's this loose arrangement where people work with each other at times to plan crimes, and then from other times they don't.
And it's all based around family loyalty.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's number one, but it didn't, I think it was said in the Special Criminal, it didn't have a really strict hierarchy.
Exactly. The Kinahans were like an army. This is their financial guy. This is the guy who does this. Yeah. So the Hutch, you're right, it doesn't exist maybe at that stage, but people are still working. Like Gerry Hutch wasn't just taking orders from Daniel Kinahan. It's believed he had his own clients, his own people that he was dealing to directly. And Gerry Hutch is always kept one step removed from it at that stage in the public mind anyway. Gerry Hutch
he was the figurehead, he was the patriarch, but not necessarily involved in day-to-day.
No, and it's described, if you look back at the articles, he's described as a retired criminal, Gerry Hutch, at that stage.
Yeah, he is.
So he essentially went off into the sunset to Lanzarote, essentially, as in, great, I'm retiring now.
Yeah.
Obviously had a significant amount of money to be able to do that. I think we know he has property interests overseas, possibly property here, which is something he might have to consider if he does run for the Dáil in terms of
declaring.
Yeah, in terms of what
he owns.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't have long to enjoy his retirement because 2012 we're going to say in around is when he goes more or less full time to Lanzarote. Becomes a resident there.
I think so.
Yeah, but he's still a citizen here in Ireland, but he's a resident there.
Yeah, and he registers businesses and he registers properties.
But by 2015, things start going wrong, and he gets drawn back.
Yeah,
if he has disconnected with the next generation of Hutches as such, he gets drawn back to Gerry Hutch's problems.
And you see, I think that's very important because that proves how key he is in the Hutch family. is that he was the man who was called. He was the man who had to go and speak to Daniel Kinahan about his nephew. It was him who met Daniel Kinahan to try and spare Gary's life.
Yeah.
So it shows that he was still a very, very important figure.
Does that make him a politician?
Well, we shall see, I suppose.
Mediating between these problems, trying to find a solution to what looks like it's going to end in murder and ultimately does. But
it did, yeah. Like it didn't. The solution he tried to broker, obviously, as we know, it didn't work out the way that the Hutch family would have liked.
And at that point, the Hutch, we'll just say Gary Hutch, for example, had taken a pop already at Daniel Kinahan. That had resulted in the shooting of Jamie Moore, the boxer, on Kinahan's villa, on the grounds of his villa. Kinahan was aware that those bullets were meant for him, and everybody was aware. While we were speculating in the media what had happened, they knew damn well what had happened, because Gary and Daniel were actually living together at that point. There's been some row over money, jealousies, never really properly got to the bottom of it.
It's meant to be something to do with the proceeds of a bank robbery. That's always been put out there, and whether that money was invested and due to be returned.
Money owed, or it's
certainly had completely broken down.
Totally, because they had been really close friends, and then it just becomes so toxic. So
which, as we have seen so many times, happens on a dime,
and it's all down to money usually.
Over. Yeah.
So in comes the negotiator, Gerry Hutch, and sits down with the two of them, and they believe they've brokered a deal that the Hutch family hand over, was it 200,000 to the Kinahan organisation. Gary Hutch's life is saved. We all know what happens next. There was a double cross.
Yeah.
And Hutch was murdered in September 2015. And by that new year, 2 hitmen go to Lanzarote to try and kill Gerry Hutch.
Unsuccessfully. I think 2 attempts during that visit by the hitman, obviously both unsuccessful, but then it was on. That was it then. I mean, it was already on after Gary was killed. I mean, the Hutch, if we want to talk about the Hutch OCG, separate to Gerry Hutch, the Hutch OCG were going to have to react to the Kinahans murdering Gary. But then when they attempted to murder the monk then in Lanzarote, that was it. All gloves were off. It was like war had begun.
Yeah. And the plan was made for the Regency.
Yeah.
Now, in the aftermath of the Regency, Eddie Hutch is killed. Gareth Hutch is killed. Noel Duggan is killed. Friends and relatives of Gerry the Monk Hutch. He leaves the country. He's last seen at the funeral of his brother, Eddie, in the company of Noel Kerwin, who is subsequently shot by that Christmas. There's a massacre.
Oh, like it was this Hutch Kinahan feud, like it was a one-sided annihilation. I mean, 18 murders, 17 of them are either Hutch family members or friends, and an innocent victim or 2. Like the Hutch organised crime gang only killed 1 person, and that was the Regency victim, David Byrne.
there was the murder of Johnny Keogh's brother, Michael
Keogh as well.
Okay.
Do you remember that one?
2 then. 2.
Yeah.
It's still a one-sided annihilation.
No, you're absolutely.
It was shocking, and you can only imagine for the likes of Gerry Hutch and Patsy Hutch, who the Special Criminal Court have said it is most likely he orchestrated, as in Patsy, the Regency Hotel attack. You can only imagine what it was like for these kind of senior members of that family to kind of just watch as they're all just gunned down. I mean, that must have been so difficult, obviously, and they were just left. It was shocking, really, wasn't it? I mean, I found it.
It was, of course.
did too. I remember the fear. You could sort of nearly smell it or feel it around here.
Yeah.
I remembered the day Gareth Hutch was murdered and being in the office. It was in morning time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was about 11 o'clock.
It was about 11 o'clock, and was in the office and starting to hear the chopper going overhead and going out onto the balcony and realising, oh my God, there's been an incident, and just driving around the corner and there he's been shot
Of course,
dead.
and that video came out really quickly.
The video came out, yeah.
But I mean,
frightening stuff.
Yeah.
So as all this is going on, unknown to us, the public anyway, Gerry is not doing nothing because he's making contact with the guys up the north.
He's trying to get rid of those weapons.
He's trying to get rid of the weapons, but he's doing all these things behind the scenes, isn't he? In terms of trying to get the dissident groups involved to
broker peace.
To broker peace, and to certainly maybe put their weight behind the Hutches to sort of put manners on the Kinahans, I think would be fair to say. So, you know, we heard all of that in the Regency, some of it like almost bizarre, wasn't it, in terms of, you know, the plotting that was going on to bring up these guys from the north. And of course, when he went up to the north, these guys weren't up to much really at all.
Well, he wasn't impressed with them.
No.
We heard that on the tapes, the 10 hours of tapes that were garnered from the bugging of Jonathan Dowdall's car. You know, it strikes me that the beginning of this journey, perhaps, to become a politician, or to strongly consider it at this point, whether he goes forward and puts his name in as a candidate for the general election, remains to be seen. But to even be considering it at this point, I think that journey starts there.
Yeah.
And it's all about that North Inner City community.
It is.
Which was always his ground, his stomping ground, his place, his community, his people. Yeah. And the Kinahans turned that community against one another for a period of time.
Yeah.
And they were paying money out to people to give information on the whereabouts of certain targets. People didn't trust their neighbours, their friends, whatever. We look into the North Inner City, and it's been a place of, you know, poverty and, you know, a place where people have been marginalised. But we do have to recognise that it always had a community spirit.
Yeah.
Always had that.
Well, I think you always find that in the most marginalised of communities. When people have nothing, they kind of come together and support each other much more than in communities where people it's very affluent. Maybe they're like...
And live behind gates, exactly,
They don't need the help of their neighbours. But in certain areas, and it's always been a factor of the North Inner City, that the people support each other, have each other's back, you know? And I think there was a couple of years there during the height of the feud where it was just pandemonium and chaos, and people didn't know what to do, because it was the might of the Kinahans versus the Hutches. And it was David versus Goliath stuff here, you know? And it was everyone always in Ireland, I think, roots for the underdog.
Yeah.
And the underdogs were clearly the Hutches.
That's for sure.
And I think that really helped with the kind of persona of Gerry Hutch as this Robin Hood figure, you know, who was kind of one of the good guys, was involved in robberies, etc., possibly in the past, but was an ordinary decent criminal, versus the Kinahans' 1 billion drug empire who live in Dubai.
Yeah, because as it went on, we started to see the absolute, you know, mammoth that the Kinahans had become, and their move to Dubai, and this boxing thing that went on, and how they were bringing all this money out to the United Arab Emirates, where they had appeared to have protection, where they were able to live in continued luxury. And that David versus Goliath thing all of a sudden becomes very clear in all our heads, what I suppose they had tried to take on, because they tried to take on this giant of an organisation.
Yeah, and like in terms of the feud, they didn't win that.
No.
But are they winning now?
Well, I mean, look, Gerry Hutch is possibly standing for election, and Daniel Keenan definitely isn't going to be, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I think that the start of that has to be born there when his community is being annihilated.
Yeah. But I think as well, you see, right, so Gerry Hutch, at that moment, his family and his community are being annihilated, as you say, and he turns to the political republicanism, you know, and there's always been that connection between the Hutch family and the IRA, basically, or people associated with the IRA. I mean, that has gone on for many, many years. And of course, the North Inner City, like back in the 80s when Sinn Fein now, I mean, are they still the leading party? I don't think they are actually in the latest polls, but like the North Inner City was always a place where Sinn Fein had a stronghold. People like Christy Burke, who's no longer in Sinn Fein. I mean, that's where one of the places of strength for Sinn Fein.
Like Jonathan Dowdall.
People like Jonathan Dowdall, honestly. Yeah. So like there was an acceptance that politicians don't have to be perfect people, and that, you know, people that were associated with the IRA could be elected and could also be seen as political representatives. You spoke about the anti-drugs movement in the North Inner City. A lot of that was backed up by people
and
with guns,
some of those
really.
meetings which Gerry Hutch himself attended.
Exactly.
It raised some eyebrows in the 1990s when he was there with Tony Gregory attending these meetings.
Exactly.
Of course.
I think John O'Driscoll, the late assistant commissioner, chaired one of those meetings, and Gerry Hutch was sitting there.
So you could look. I mean, I'm in that constituency. And I know, like, the part of the constituency I live on, they might go, "Oh my God, Gerry Hutch has this link with weapons." But there's other parts of the constituency that have often voted for people.
I totally agree with you there. And it's easy for people from outside to look in and judge that. But the fact of the matter is, it's real life, isn't it?
It's real life, and it's
real life.
So if you look back for three decades, you'll see people that have links with weapons, not people that are carrying weapons, but have links with people with weapons, have always factored. Now you see at the moment we have Mary Lou it's probably one of the most hotly contested constituencies in the country, if not the most contested.
And actually, let's just talk about where it goes from. So we're talking about down to the 3 Arena. Up to
the Navan Road,
the forecourts.
Jonathan Dowdall's
road.
Well,
it probably does. Yeah, it probably goes
up. Go that far? Yeah.
Yeah, it probably would it go to Stony Batter, so it would probably go up around there.
And then on up, exactly as you say, past Jonathan Dowdall's house. He's no longer there, so they won't be voting if Gerry Hutch goes.
Wouldn't it be interesting to see if Gerry Hutch does put himself forward? Is he going to knock on that
on that door? Wouldn't that be a picture opportunity?
Ask if
so then it goes to Cabra.
To Cabra,
Phibsborough.
Yeah.
So if you want, Cabra.
So Cabra Phibsborough is this kind of,
So look, you
woke
have
bloody, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's all,
definitely. Sandal wearing organic coffee shops.
Exactly.
I mean, so you have the TDs at the moment are Mary Lou McDonald, Pascal Donoghue, who lives in Phibsborough, Nasa Horgan. So she's the Green Party, and that's all going to be Phibsborough kind of Cabra.
If he runs, he's not chasing those votes. He's not going after Fine Gael. He's not going after Green Party voters.
No.
Essentially, it's Mary Lou, Sinn Fein, and it's Gary Gannon and the Social Democrats.
Gary Gannon, and also Joe Costello was there, who Joe Costello isn't going to stand again. Joe Costello was there for Labour, who would have been a really, really...
Was there? In what seat then? The Gary Gannon?
No, he lost the seat at the last election, but he still would have got a very strong vote for Labour. And Joe Costello's area of strength would have been the North Inner City. Okay. Gary Gannon obviously is from Sheriff Street originally. He's standing for
a lot of support.
He does have a lot of support, but he's standing for the Social Democrats, so he would pick up votes as well in kind of Phibsborough, Cabra. The other people that he'd be up against, Christy Burke. I don't know if Christy Burke will run again. Christy Burke has run for years, obviously for Sinn Féin for many decades, but now he's an independent. So I mean, I think if Gerry Hutch was to run, and Christy Burke wasn't, he would hope.
And there's a perfect example of what you were talking about and people getting elected. And Christy Burke, of course, was our Lord Mayor. And Christy Burke was was he not one of the prisoners that was airlifted, or they attempted to airlift him out of Mount George Jail?
Exactly. So, I mean...
So he's a bit of a history.
Yeah, and so Gerry Hutch might hope to pick up some of his votes. Mary Lou, of course, was elected massively. I think so she got 11,000 votes, and the closest to her...
In 2020?
In 2020. The closest to her was Pascal Donoghue, who got 4,100. So she absolutely wiped
Huge
them out.
Numbers,
Now, there's no hope of her.
Right, so what's her position? Tell us a little bit about, because it's very difficult to follow all this Sinn Féin scandals. I'm going to land that on him, Ali, okay?
What do you mean? We need another hour to get through it all.
Yeah, they're in the shit, right?
And it's so hard to understand.
That's it, right? We're not going to get in.
Yeah, okay. They're in the shit, right? Okay. Time and time again, they're in the shit, okay.
So Mary Lou she only narrowly got elected for a couple of general elections in a row. She only got in on transfers, but the last time she got 11,000 votes. And Sinn Féin really didn't expect that, so they hadn't run a second candidate or anything. But there's no hope of her getting that this time. That was on a wave, a personal wave, and a wave for Sinn Féin. So her vote is really going to be dramatically cut, and those votes.
Is there any sort of indication of what percentage it might be cut by?
Well, I mean, so she got 35%, I think, the last time, but Sinn Féin are down. The polls in the Sunday Indo in particular will show they're down in around the early 20s, aren't they? Even lower at times.
It's been a horrendous couple of weeks for her, essentially.
So all of those votes are in play. Now, you'll have Malachy Steenson who'll run And he will.
Is he going to run? Yeah,
he's going to run.
Right. He said he's going to run.
Yeah,
anyway.
he's handing out leaflets
will
at the moment.
Will he run if Gerry the Monk Hutch is running?
Well, it's a different kind of thing as well. But Malachy Steenson obviously
but they'd be going after the same voters. No?
They would. Well, to a degree, yeah. So Mary Lou's votes were up for play because she was picking up that anti-establishment vote, maybe. And Malachy Steenson will definitely be strong. I mean, he Malachy Steenson's an anti-immigration. It's also, has links to, Malachy Steenson, it's openly reported, had a conviction previously in connection with an incident in the Special Criminal Court. Malachy Steenson.
He's a guy on the ground, though, isn't he?
He's a guy on the ground.
He's out talking to people right in the heartland of where Gerry Hutch would be talking to people.
But he organised all those anti-immigration protests in East Wall, so he picked up a strong vote in that constituency in the local elections. So Gerry Hutch would probably hope to pick up votes from Joe Costello, maybe if he doesn't run, Christy Burke, some of Mary Lou's, some of Malachy Steenson's.
My God, he could do really well.
Well, what is really well?
Well, I mean, 4,000 votes is really good.
Well, 4,000 will put him in. He may get elected if he gets 4,000.
These are all the kind of things he's going to have to be thinking about.
And we're not political journalists, but Niall's given us a good flavour there of what it might take.
Yeah.
So 4,000 is not inconceivable.
Yeah. 4,000 is not inconceivable at all.
I just think if he does run, which as we know he's seriously considering, if he does run, I think what's really going to be interesting is the reaction from the other people, either be them sitting TDs or candidates. I mean, like we were saying about Special Criminal Court, there's certain things politicians can say, well, the Special Criminal Court said you were in control of the weapons that were used in the Regency Hotel. And that's something they can throw in his face. But we have to look at Mary Lou. Mary Lou can't say anything.
No.
She literally can't say what can she say? Because of Jonathan Dowdall.
Yeah.
But also...
So that's what I'm fascinated to watch unfold.
Yes.
Is how she handles it if he stands in her backyard.
Well, listen, we've talked about the reality of the situation on the ground with the votes and how we can consider that he could get elected here if he goes for it, okay? This is not something that's just, off the wall. So what are the kind of things that he needs to consider, right? With his background and I suppose with a lot that has happened to him. First and foremost, his security while he's out there looking for those votes. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, he has a gym form, which, as probably a lot of your listeners would know, is a Garda information message, which means there is a threat to your life. Now, I know was it 2016 he got that? And I think Gardaí would say that the threat level isn't that serious anymore. But I mean, is it once you get a gym form, you always have a gym form? But also,
it will enrage people if it looks like Gerry Hutch is going to get elected. I mean, it talks in terms of threats to his life. Well, I mean, if it would
enrage the guards.
It would enrage the guards. It would enrage some of the people associated with the
establishment.
Yeah, some of the people associated with the Killing cartel, maybe who have personal feelings about the murder of David Byrne. Yeah. I'm sure that would.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, remember, there's people have been really angered how Gerry Hutch has been presented as something different than David Byrne in particular. The political establishment,
the politicians would be
outraged.
Would it not be vom.com across the fucking Dáil?
Or will they opt to just say nothing because it's just if they. They're going to be asked, if he does run, they're going to continuously be asked to comment on it. Yeah. And the more they comment on it, the more it just kind of fuels the media coverage, which is helpful to him if he is standing.
Has to be.
He's not going to have to spend hundreds of thousands on a campaign.
On his security stuff, I think since he walked free from the Special Criminal Court, he stayed around Dublin for quite a while. Everyone thought he was going to run for the hills, run for Spain, Lanzarote, wherever. He didn't. He stayed and he partied, actually. Yeah. And he went for pints locally and he met his mates and he walked the streets and he regularly walked past our building here in Talbot Street on his way downtown. And he looks comfortable. He looks like a guy who will always have to watch his back. I mean, he will always have to.
You'd have to imagine that would be difficult on the campaign trail, wouldn't you? I mean, he's not going to be able to, the way normal TDs, normal politicians, when they're out campaigning, put out a press release, I will be walking around
Oh yes, he'll maybe have to do pop-up stuff.
That's what I mean.
Would he be doing it like for the North Side people? Here's Gerry Hutch with a bollard. We need new bollards on the road, or why don't we have traffic ramps?
I reckon any time he goes out to knock doors, is going to be such a circus around him that nobody could get at him anyway.
Like he's not going to announce it. He's just suddenly going to be in certain areas doing that.
Yeah, probably.
But like you said, honestly, his personal security, that has to be a major concern for him. Does it have to be a concern for the guards? Are they, like you were saying, are members of the Byrne family, or sorry, not necessarily members of the Byrne family, but associates, are criminals linked to the Kinnigan cartel going to be like, the cheek of this lad?
I think they will.
Actually, let's try and kill him. Oh, he's going to run as a TD. Let's, these are things that have to be considered.
At the same time, I think the higher your profile, it does give a bit of, it gives a bit of protection. And of course, if Gerry Hutch is out knocking doors and there's a circus around him, there is probably going to have to be a guard presence. Store Street are going to be busy. And where else? What other stations are in the constituency?
I suppose Mountjoy Station up near Phibsborough or Cabra even.
I think they would have to probably have a bit of a presence on the street if there's,
I think for him, like I would think it's not a good idea, because you're stepping into an arena where it's not something, it's not his natural habitat. Like we've seen with the Kinnahans, the state did, maybe didn't take them seriously enough. But when the state did, when they stepped into that arena and the state started taking them seriously, even the power of the Kinnahans can't go up against the power of the state. I don't think politicians would view this as being amusing or, a quirky phenomenon. I think that they would focus their efforts on him even more. That's my own personal feeling.
But what can they do? I mean, if Hutch is clean, what can they do? He doesn't have a conviction since the 1980s. He has been found not guilty in the Special Criminal Court, albeit he was in control of those weapons for a period of time. Those weapons were on their way out of the jurisdiction when he was in control of it. There was no evidence he was in control of those weapons before they were used. It was after they were used and when they were trying to get rid of them. Just being a little bit pedantic here about that. But yeah, so what have they got to... he settled his tax bill with the Criminal Assets Bureau. Is it possible for somebody to have a past and to be useful to society and their own community and to step forward to try and, in a political way, help that community?
Well, I mean, that's
what we're going to find out.
Well, it's definitely possible. But if you're not whiter than white, you're putting yourself at risk. And
I mean, look, like he doesn't have any serious criminal convictions. That's a fact. Like he doesn't have drugs convictions or anything along those lines. But then we also have to remember, is he still under investigation?
And is he still under investigation?
Well, that's the question. I mean, I think the NBCI have said that he is. Essentially, they have said he is under investigation for... I would be
of the opinion that he's under investigation in regard to, well, certainly the Hutch organisation are under investigation in regards to corruption of John Spud Murphy. That corruption case, basically, where the retired Garda John Spud Murphy was understood to be passing information on to criminal organisations. My understanding of that is that the Hutch organisation are one of those groupings that were possibly, taking that information. Does that mean they committed a crime or he does?
Well, either way, so that I mean, those questions are there. And
there's that. And apart from that,
yeah,
what are we looking at? What is the state looking at? Is the Gardaí investigating Gerry Hutch for any major involvement in any major organised crime?
It was my understanding that the NBCI are looking at whether or not he should answer questions or face a charge of being
director,
the leader of an organised crime gang.
And there's what's the famous quote from the American politicians? There's known unknowns and then there's unknown unknowns. So we don't know what else.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that.
I just remember after his trial when he got out, it was immediately it was put out that by the guards. We're looking because it was a really bad day for the guards.
Yeah, it was embarrassing for the guards and the state.
And it was immediately put out, no, we're looking at him for this.
Yeah. Now, certainly it's my understanding that the Hutch organised crime group is believed to be a drug trafficking network. and that they make part of their funds from drug trafficking. So if you're taking it a step further to Gerry the Monk Hutch is the leader or the patriarch of that grouping, how far away is he from that kind of activity, which has not yet been proven?
Yeah, well, they are the questions, if he does run, that he will, I suppose, have to perhaps answer, as in he might be asked these questions.
Yeah.
You know, as in, are you a member of the Hutch organised crime gang? I would expect his answers to that would be no, that he's a member of the Hutch family, that he's not part of the Hutch OCG. And I don't think the guards have any evidence that he has ever been directly involved in drug dealing activities in relation to the carried out by the Hutch organised crime gang. But there has been suggestions I've heard from some Gardaí that he might have invested some of his money, but kept very far removed in drug shipments. But again, that's completely unproven.
And at the time of the Special Criminal Court, when Detective Superintendent David Gallagher gave evidence in relation to the Hutch organised crime group, the first time we'd heard they were an organised crime group, an OCG, and the first time they were named as that, the evidence doesn't point directly to Gerry Hutch or what he said. His belief evidence didn't point. He didn't name Gerry Hutch as that patriarch.
No,
but he was named as such in the judgment, was
Tara
he not?
Burns.
By Tara Burns.
As the patriarch.
Yeah.
And but then she also said that she believes that it was most likely that Patsy Hutch, his brother, organised the Regency attack, but that Gerry stepped in as head of the family, essentially, to sort out its aftermath.
To clean it up.
Yeah. Which is what
in the aftermath.
Is about, you know?
Exactly.
Is cleaning it up after it.
So, you know, when they haven't identified the patriarch of that Hutch organised crime group, and you had Patsy Hutch so central to the entire trial of the Regency, and sometimes closer to the guns, you know, that we physically saw him in the industrial estate where the guns were passed to Shane Rowan's car just before they were seized. You know, that has left that open, you know.
For sure.
Is it Patsy Hutch or is it Gerry Hutch who's been described as that patriarch?
I think it was like Patsy was kind of put in the frame for arranging the Regency attack, and Gerry was said to have swooped in and tried to clean it up, as we said. But
as the politician.
That's it. It's the politician in him kind of coming out. Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, there's lots of ways for him to answer and to bat around these issues that will come up for him. What about his declaring his assets?
I mean, do you have to declare your assets overseas if you're running in for a general election in Ireland? I don't think so.
If you get elected.
If you get elected, you'll have you'll have to list. I mean, people
everything
everything you have, foreign and in base in Ireland, you have listed.
You do, yeah.
If you get elected, yeah.
And say, for example, let's have a look at we always sort of said that he bought up property, that he had a property empire in this country. If a lot of that might be in perhaps his wife's name or something, that's still his. Is it?
It's still, I mean, that by law, you're
married and
it's joint assets, isn't it?
So there would be some assets that would have to be declared even if they were in his wife's name.
Yeah.
And if assets were in other family members' names, that's a different matter.
That's a different
it's
matter.
It's only your wife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, the other interesting thing would be, say, Paschal Donoghue is elected first. Yeah. And he gets a surplus of 1,000 votes. Do I have to transfer? I mean, that would be the funny moment.
How would that go down a Fitzgerald?
Would that then be transferred to Gerry Hutch? I mean, that would be...
Yeah, I mean, would there be an element of people just... He does have this likability factor that is kind of hard to measure, especially at the ballot box if it goes to that. Will people just be like, just throw him a fourth preference or whatever?
Exactly, they go, look, and I mean, that's an unknown factor. But,
but I don't think... I can't imagine he has come to this decision to consider this lightly. He seems, as we know, to do everything after giving it a large degree of thought. So...
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be an impulsive kind of a guy.
No, not whatsoever. I think he's the opposite of impulsive. And even the fact, as we know, he's kind of always someone who's kind of lived on his wits, and that's how he survived various hit attempts over the years. Is because he kind of follows his instincts and knows when something isn't up. So I think he's given this, I think he's consulted a lot of people. And I think it's the question is why, really? And also the question that we still don't know the answer to, which hopefully we will in the next couple of weeks, is like, what is his platform? What does he want to do? What does he want to change? Like, why like, why in the name of God would anyone want to be a politician? Is my opinion. But, you know, I'm not Gerry Hutch.
No, it wouldn't be for us.
No. I'd go to Lanzarote, I have to say.
Yeah, no, so would I. God almighty, definitely. I suppose that finally, and if we finish up for the moment on this, the Corinthians Boxing Club, which, you know, he's considered this to such an extent that is considered what would be his HQ if he goes for this.
I mean, I think it was almost 20 years ago, was it, that he bought that and essentially gave it to the community. And it's like a 99-year lease, I think, is it? And like a nominal
€1
a year kind of thing. And but like I said, that was almost 20 years ago. So that just shows how much he was kind of focused on the community back then.
Yeah.
Like, he hasn't just suddenly done this as part of his bid to run for the Dáil.
Exactly.
I think we can say what we like about Gerry Hutch, we can criticise him for many things, but he is somebody who has always been dedicated to his own community. And I think that shows that. That
was a long-term dedication for him and a lifetime commitment to that boxing club, that they would have a premises and they would have somewhere to train. And Kelly Harrington is trained in there, and loads of other boxers have found and have been taken, I suppose, many young kids that go into boxing. It's one of those sports that it can give them a focus sometimes if they're floating around out there in a dangerous
I think
place.
That club has actually, like, by some of its main trainers over the years, it has, you know, they have said quite openly, this club has really helped children. It's saved kids' lives. It's got them off the streets, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a stark contrast to how the Kinnahans approach boxing.
Well,
I mean, the Corinthians was never going to make Gerry Hutch any money. It was going to be a limited glory. And the Kinnahans plan to dominate world boxing through bullying and splashing the cash. Like, that is part of the contrast between the aims and the ambitions of the two organisations, I suppose you could say.
So I'll give you both the final word. How do you think Daniel Kinahan would feel about this?
I wonder, is that part of the motivation for Gerry Hutch to give them another couple of fingers?
Mischief making.
Yeah, mischief making, I think, to show how much of a different position he is in to them, you know? I wonder if that would be part of the motivation.
Ali?
But I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think Daniel Kinahan has bigger worries than whether Gerry Hutch stands for the Dáil, for sure. But I just think Gerry Hutch is very serious about this. But if he is serious, we need to know about it officially very soon, Nicola. That's where.
And as you say, what he's standing for.
Well, you have to have a platform.
Yeah.
I mean. Yeah. And we don't know what that is yet.
Right. Well, look, this is the beginning.
And what's your final word on it, Nicola?
Well, I'm just going to say that this is either the beginning or the end of something. You know, he's either going to pull out and decide, you know, somebody will get in his ear and say to him, it's a really bad idea, or else he's going to go for it. And if he goes for it, we're all going to be on a bit of a journey of understanding of a very colourful community who are very forgiving to their own, and you know, who maybe will see something in Gerry Hutch that the political journalists and that don't.
Well, that's it. We shall see.
All right.
Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emil.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.